So over to Mark, our first speaker. Please welcome Mark Berry.
Just get this for you. Thank you. It should be down here.
Thanks, Bob. Actually, I'm the ex-director of SILE. Jane's now in that role. I'm the director of the Design Research Institute, which is a sort of another organ of RMIT University in Australia. The topic, virtual to actual, I've been thinking about this a lot in terms of how to relate this to the challenges that we face when we come to smart geometry. So I thought what would be interesting is if we treat the activities at the smart geometry, which can be enveloped into just 4 days and no more. What if you actually made that the virtual and you then took the lessons from a smart geometry cluster and made them actual? And that's what I'm going to relate. But I'll just start with the background, which is a project. We had two things to start with. This is the project from Copenhagen 2 years ago. This image is from the Sagrada Familia. It's Gaudi's equipment for testing the strength of stone. So you can see there's a little cylinder of granite down there and this large heavy weight. There's actually a better photograph which shows the apparatus broken. But that would be not the point. The point is the role of the experiment. And then there's this little known quote. Gaudi never wrote anything, but people wrote a lot about what he could have written about. And this one is, we do not know if Gaudi had completed any special study of the acoustics of this church. This isn't the Sagrada Familia, it's the Colonia Güell chapel, but it's the same principle. The acoustics of this church, but he was well aware that its structure full of columns, pierced arches, broken volumes and corners was an effective way to avoid resonance. Furthermore, the hyperbolic paraboloid vaults disperse sound instead of concentrating it. We also believe, on the basis of our own experience, that such an internal structure avoids to a great extent the echoing that could be produced in the absence of extensive enough absorbent surfaces. So we took as our kind of parti this theory of Gaudi that these surfaces would actually modify you can't get rid of reverberance, but you can mollify it through an acoustic treatment. And that led to a project based on these intersected geometries at Smart Geometry, where we took the lessons of the master, translated over the decades on site that's on the left-hand side, to a completely similar process with growing expertise, it will be said, but not quite the equal of the original project. And we produced these surfaces, and of course we had this dialogue going on between a simulation of sound, performance and space under the expert tutelage of Brady Peters and our cluster team. At the same time, we were busy trying to make an experimental one-to-one. And we looked at the characteristics of sound. We made a series of models based on the tools that Alex and Daniel had put together under Brady's sort of tutelage in the area of sound. We looked at how we might simulate sound and its reflection. The science of sound in terms of absorption is very well understood, but the science of the reflection of sound seems to be still in a grey area, which might account for why we have such difficulty designing cafes that don't allow conversation. The testing rig that Brady has requires these discs to be placed like this onto this apparatus, and this is a space. I'm aware that Jane, Brady, Alex and others involved in this may well be in the room, so if you hear any muttered expletives it's because I've murdered the science. But my understanding is that space has no walls that are parallel to each other, so any sound that's emitted in here pings around madly, and then you can actually get the differential qualities of whatever you put down on that disk there. Now this is the graph which I don't fully understand what it's telling me in terms of the numbers, but what it's saying is that each of these experiments, each colour is a different participant's contribution. What we can see is that, they're all using the same type of surface, but they're using it in a different way. And we can see that without being able to say which is better, I can say that they're different. And the fact that they're different means that as a designer, we need to be able to tune in to those differences and know which is the better one and know how to produce it. And if not, we aren't able to, any criticism of architecture being ocular-centric, we need to be able to challenge that, and that needs better knowledge. So we set about making a one-to-one prototype. We had the test, which was the concave wall, and you could stand in the middle of it and speak, and you could hear yourself inside your head, which, depending on your ego, was a good experience or not, but certainly unusual. And next to it, slowly but surely, we produced this facsimile, same size, and you could stand in the middle and speak to it and not hear yourself inside your head. So it worked. And that was the end of the experience. 4 days of intense effort. All the simulation tools worked, and the one-to-one was produced duly. A little later, because that was 2 years ago, we invited Brady to come to Melbourne and run a workshop, because we had a situation where we just moved into a new building called the Design Hub. And the Design Hub is blessed with these remarkable open spaces that are 60 meters long and 10 meters wide on this side of the wall, and 60 meters long and 4 meters wide on the other side of the wall. And of course, you don't have to be in that space for long to realize that there's actually rather difficult to have a noisy conversation without disturbing everybody else, or worse, having a conversation when you're talking about everybody else and everybody else can hear what you're saying about them. So there was a decision that some kind of sound pod was required by the university. The architect was very clear about not having the space subdivided. He's made it impossible to do so. So the only way to actually affect any acoustic separation is to build a pod. And these pods are available on the market for, in Australian dollars, 28,000. And so we were able to extract that budget from the university and convert it into a project where we would actually build a sound pod based on this acoustic experimentation from the Smartgeometry of 2011. Now, the characteristics of this were that it wouldn't reach the ceiling, so it wasn't going to be a sort of separate structure, and it wouldn't have a door. So basically, it's this sort of cocoon that you'd go into, and more or less it'd be looking like this. That's the outcome of the workshop, and you can see the size and the way it's separated from the ceiling. It's quite difficult to intersect these hyperboloids of revolution of one sheet, because if you have them unevenly distributed and they're different parameters, they won't intersect with a plane. They'll actually make a very gorgeous looking 3D curve, which are technically very difficult to make unless you're actually a plaster model maker in the Sagrada Familia, or you have a full-size digital printer, which we're all pursuing in various ways. So the intelligence of this is to actually tessellate in a Voronoi pattern these hyperboloids similar around a sphere, and that way you can ensure that the intersections are planar. So in the sense of from the virtual to the actual, what tends to happen is all this amazing stuff which I'm about to show you, most of which I don't understand fully because it's been done with people with sets of skills that are nowhere near mine. Sorry, I don't mine are nowhere near theirs, but it's the fact that you need all this stuff to be going on in a diverse team with these diverse skills for this to be made possible for a budget of 28,000. And we live in a university where if the budget's 28,000, that is the budget. So there wasn't any sort of wriggle room. So going from the theory of distributing these surfaces around the spherical surface, this is Daniel Davis's notebook, and it's the math that starts entering in the equation. It's the first slide of his collection. It's the business of trying to distribute these cells around the shape without ending up with any unfortunate little mini cells at the top, which you can imagine could happen unless you put some very sophisticated coding in that will actually distinguish which is an acceptable size and which isn't. And when you see this one, you can just get a sense of how many cells there are. They're all similar in terms of their attributes and their construction, but they're absolutely unique. There's no two cells that are the same. I think he gave me this slide because I think that he thought I'd find it amusing, because I do, because I guess this is what's really happening behind the scenes. And there you can see the theory, expostulate, and compare this with the original experiment. The original experiment, of course, revealed that these are actually not quite planar. And as you can probably just see here, there's a slight lean away from the vertical. And this is a devastating discovery on day, I think somewhere on day 3, without much we could do about it. So those of us involved can remember the pain of the realization that this would never be a truly vertical wall. But fortunately, we didn't see anybody for spirit level. But you see there is this slight lean as it was tending towards the sphere inadvertently. There you can see the intersections being explored. That's the intersection which gives the Sagrada Familia its characteristics. But these curves, as I say, are easily produced by craftspeople, but we don't have the technology at one-to-one to do this. And there you can see the sphere being rationalized into planes, and you can get an idea of the workflow. And this is the cell, the construction. It's got a back and a front, which is hyperbolic. The back is planar, and then it has this box. And the next set of images are from Alex. So I've just shown you the task that Daniel led in getting the geometry explicit in order to be taken to the next level, which is the actual fabrication. Love to go over this in detail, but we haven't got time for that. Unfortunately, we haven't got time to go into this in detail because I have no idea what this is telling us, except that there are a number of approaches possible, and Alex was leading that one. Alex Peña de Leon, another great name for Bob's benefit. So there we are, there's the resolution into the elements. So I'll just finish up with what happened next. What happened next is we built it, not quite on time, but certainly on budget. Digital fabrication, that's what we're all excited about. It makes these things possible. However, and this is the central point of my brief contribution today, is I don't think we're anywhere close to solving digital assembly. And you can build these boxes through the fabrication processes in a way that we couldn't have done 10 years ago, and we can all give ourselves a gold star for that. But when it comes to actually putting them together, there were many, many hours of indentured student labour involved, which aren't calculated within that 28,000, which is probably a very good thing. But this is, I think, the challenge of the future. This will not be solved by ourselves having our own robots in our own university laboratories. I think this is demanding that we form meaningful partnerships with other departments and universities. Many of us, I suppose, are doing that. We're definitely having a good conversation at our university. I think the conversation is happening because we have this building. If we didn't, I don't think we'd be very much further ahead, because we have been trying to have this conversation for quite a long time. But I think the roboticists at universities get it when you say we want to do all these things, but they're unique. They're not a pattern, and we can't just do one simple piece of code for them. 3 types of surface. One is a spun aluminium, is from the former. The second surface is this really gorgeous translucent plastic with a very matte finish to it. And we tested, fortunately at our university we have a fully accredited testing facility for transmission, so the cells were actually tested and testable. And then its construction. The third surface is this kind of felt that's made from recycled water bottles. And one of the discoveries of the project, apart from, you'll see that some really interesting materials emerged from John Cherry, who is a master craftsman and part of the project team, was able to bring all these ideas. So this material emerged, and we discovered that you can actually form it at very low temperature, which was a surprise to the manufacturer of the material, and one no doubt they'll be taking advantage of. You can see these lines of intersection where this one spherical surface gives over to another one. And the other interesting material is there's this plastic which is transparent, but it gives you a colour, a different colour depending how you look at it. And there's another plastic, which is this one here, which has a ring of LEDs around it and a whole set of invisible nanoparticles inside the plastic. So when light comes around the perimeter, it actually deflects the light 90 degrees. So these are the lights. It seemed to only take about 4 days and about 6 people to assemble it, but then it seemed to take months to actually wire it. So I think there's some lessons there. And there you can see it built. There's the entrance. So the front of it, which is facing the light, gets the blue treatment, and the back gets this very somber grey. Lovely. It means it's not actually dominating the space at all. In fact, since these photographs are taken, all these concave spaces have been colonized by, I don't think the people just want to listen to the conversation inside. They're actually very nice spaces to park your kit against. And there's the door into it. And that's what you see as you walk in. And quite generous in space, absolute precision. Digitally fabricated, humanly assembled. And here you can see the effect of the lights. That's the lights off, and that's the lights on, so you can just see the difference. It's amazing. You see light coming from an invisible source. It's the first, and there's the space itself. This occurred to me this morning. Quite a few things resonated, but what is it that smart geometry does that we can't do in the real world, and how do we connect with it? Many factors contribute. This is a quote from a book on the Colonial Well Church, which I first quoted from, and it's talking about the uniqueness of the Colonial Well Church as the hanging model church. Many factors contribute to this uniqueness. The client gave Gaudí complete liberty to set up this building laboratory to test his new approaches to design. The architect had through the years developed new methods of working which gave him initial unconventional three-dimensional answers obtained with the help of scale models and full-size mock-ups without using the drafting table technique and its consequent limitations. We may say that the building was not conceived or born as an ordinary building, would it be in any architect's office. So just to finish with the point that smart geometry obviously gives us this chance to do the experimentation. And if we can take the experiment out from the cluster and put it into a real actual situation, then we have more opportunity of actually influencing the clients and the builders and all the others who seem to be very risk averse. Thank you very much.